All right, so today's ALICE Task Force presenter we have is Bonnie Stender. She's with Idaho Legal Aid, and she graciously agreed to present to this group kind of on a short notice, but we're glad that you're here. And go ahead and see if you can share screen. You should have the ability to do so.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, let's see. I've done this once before, so I should know how to do it.
Looks like it's there we go. Nice.
Oh, great. Okay. Great. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and get started here. And try to leave a little time for questions at the end. And I may skip a few slides just in the interest of time. But yeah, again, thank you to Carrie and all of you for the opportunity to present. So just a little bit about my organization. Idaho Legal Aid Services is a statewide nonprofit law firm that provides civil legal services to low-income Idahoans. We have 7 regional and 2 satellite offices across the state. We mostly focus on family law, such as divorce and custody cases where there is domestic violence present. Also housing law, evictions, repairs, and fair housing issues like the ones I'm presenting on today. And then also senior legal services, which can really run the gamut from wills and Medicaid issues. Also pretty much any other civil legal issues they may have. And we're always happy to partner with other organizations through referrals or otherwise. So today I'm going to talk about the Fair Housing Act and its protections. So the Fair Housing Act, which is codified in Title 8 of the Civil Rights Acts, it prohibits discrimination in housing. And there are several protected classes. So it specifically prohibits discrimination on the basis of a person's race, color, sex, which a couple of years ago, the Supreme Court, in a case called Bostock, interpreted in a similar law sex to include sexual orientation and gender identity. Also religion, national origin, disability, and familial status, which basically means presence of children under 18 years old. Can also mean, someone who's planning to adopt or someone who is pregnant. Idaho actually has a similar state level law that is a little less protective in that it doesn't recognize familial status as a protected class, but more protective than the National Fair Housing Act in that it covers providers with 2 or more units, whereas the Fair Housing Act generally only covers providers with 4 or more units. And Idaho's Fair Housing Act is enforced through the Idaho Human Rights Commission, whereas the Fair Housing Act is enforced by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. And the Fair Housing Act applies to a wide range of people involved in the housing industry. So it's not just landlords, it can be advertisers, homeowners, home builders, condominium developers or owners, really almost anyone who touches housing in some way. And the Fair Housing Act also defines housing very broadly as any building, structure, or portion of a building that is occupied or intended to be occupied, and where a person intends to return. And it doesn't just apply to, apartment rentals. It can apply, or it does apply to shelters, group homes, manufactured homes. Again, a very wide range of housing types. So what can't a housing provider do under the Fair Housing Act? Basically, they can't refuse to rent, sell, or deal with a person of a protected class, discriminate in the terms or conditions of a sale, force a tenant to provide information about the extent of their disability, or refuse to design and construct covered multifamily dwellings that are accessible to and usable by persons with disabilities. They also can't state that housing is available when it actually isn't, threaten, intimidate, or interfere with a protected class member or someone that has filed a complaint. And I'll talk a little later about how someone goes about filing a fair housing complaint, or assign different policies, conditions, or terms. That might be, for example, charging a woman in a wheelchair $50 every month because she can't mow her portion of the lawn, or charging a higher security deposit to families with children. It also prohibits a range of discriminatory practices related to either home owners or renters. So won't go through all of those, but for example, redlining you might have heard of is a lender or insurer refuses their services or requires additional costs in certain neighborhoods. And there was actually a recent $1 million settlement from Prudential Insurance because the company refused to provide homeowners insurance in DC, but did provide it in the outlying areas, which have less minority demographics. And so some current trends we're seeing in this area, there are unfortunately quite a few, some examples, landlords charging higher deposits or asking for co-signers only for applicants who are disabled. Also, refusing to rent to larger families or families with a disabled child. In Idaho in particular, we're seeing an increase in calls related to harassment of Idahoans at their residences based on race, national origin, religion, or sex. For example, posting of signs and flyers targeting Jewish persons, and repeated threats and harassment towards LGBTQ persons. And more of what's prohibited, for example, they cannot apply different rules to different people, specifically based on their protected class, or refuse to make reasonable modifications or accommodations for a disabled tenant. Again, they can't retaliate against someone who's filed a complaint, restrict the choice of unit or neighborhood. So what can they do? They can do things in a way that don't discriminate based on protected class, such as check someone's ability to pay rent, references, create rules for the benefit of the entire community, as long as those rules are not discriminatory. So, you know, one of the protected classes is disability. So what does that mean? Under the Fair Housing Act, it's defined as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, or having a record or history of such impairment, or even just being regarded as having such an impairment. I had a client not too long ago who was discriminated against on the grounds that the landlord thought she had dementia, but she actually didn't. And the definition of disability is pretty broad. It can involve, you know, ones you might think of like mobility issues, you know, major illnesses, but also mental disabilities or, you know, mental illnesses, depression, and even a history of alcohol or drug addiction, as long as the person is not a current user. And this just goes a little more into that. Gone over a few of those examples. So specifically for people with disabilities, a landlord must permit a tenant with a disability to make reasonable modifications to a rental unit or common areas. That might be, you know, installing a grab bar in a bathroom, or installing a ramp for a wheelchair. And they must also allow a tenant with a disability to have a reasonable accommodation, which is a change, exception, or adjustment to a rule, policy, practice, or service. You know, such as, for example, having an assistance animal with them when otherwise the landlord has a no pets policy. So specifically for reasonable modifications, generally the person asking for the modification has to pay, but when the housing provider receives federal funds, they may be responsible for the cost. So, you know, for example, subsidized housing, like project-based Section 8 facilities, or low-income tax credit buildings. So a housing provider can, to a certain extent, ask for verification of a disability when someone is making a reasonable modification or accommodation request. But that can be done in a variety of ways. Generally, you know, it's done through a medical professional who's familiar with the person and can verify that they do have a disability, and the disability requires the accommodation they're asking for in order for that person to equally enjoy their housing. But that verification should never disclose the severity or nature of the disability. The landlord is not entitled to that information. Again, they can't ask about the nature or severity. They can't charge an extra fee or deposit, or deny these requests if proof of necessity is presented and the accommodation or modification is reasonable, meaning not an undue administrative or financial burden. So the Fair Housing Act also prohibits certain kinds of harassment from either the landlord, their employees, or even neighbor-on-neighbor harassment when the landlord has some sort of control over that. So some examples of that, you know, it could be a tenant repeatedly yelling anti-Muslim slurs at a Muslim tenant who has just moved in. You know, a Jewish family finding flyers around their home, making anti-Semitic statements and threats. Unfortunately, that is something that one of our offices has seen. So I won't go through this, but this is just to show that the DOJ, in some cases, when there's been a HUD complaint, if the DOJ finds cause, they can take on that case and actually file suit against the housing provider. So these are some cases that were brought on the grounds of neighbor-on-neighbor harassment. And these are just some resources, some additional information about that. The Fair Housing Act also prohibits retaliation because a person reported a discriminative practice to a housing provider or other authority. And that includes retaliation against someone who helped a complainant with a complaint. So, if you're helping one of your clients file a fair housing complaint, you would also be protected against retaliation. So some examples of this, it could be threatening a tenant with eviction because they requested a reasonable accommodation, refusing to renew a tenant's lease because they filed a complaint. Unfortunately, this is something we see sometimes. And these are just a few more cases in this instance related to retaliation. So what can someone do if they believe they've been discriminated against? I'll just come back to that. So best practice is to document it as best you can, the time it occurred, any witnesses, what happened, and then report it. And you can report it to HUD. They have a very nice, easy website dedicated to that, where you can file an online complaint, or I believe mail it in. Also, again, the Idaho Human Rights Commission handles violations of the state level law. You can also file a complaint with them. And then the Intermountain Fair Housing Council, you may be familiar with, is a wonderful state level organization based in Boise, but they help throughout the state, and they specifically focus on fair housing issues. And one thing to be aware of is that complaints filed with HUD have to be filed within 1 year of the time that the discrimination occurred. So there is a time limit there. And HUD is bound by statute to either complete the investigation within 100 days or provide a reason that it couldn't. These are just a few other resources there. And that is it, all I have. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
I have a question for you. Are there any protections for persons with a criminal record?
Sure. So good question. There's actually been, some work on that. And I believe the answer is it can be discriminatory, specifically because it can sometimes have a disproportionate impact on minorities. And so I believe it's a little bit case by case specific. And I think there are some additional protections, not under the Fair Housing Act, but under regulations specific to subsidized housing for people with criminal records applying for subsidized housing. I know that the NHLP, the National Housing Law Project, I believe on its website has some great resources and additional information on that. So I might check there. But yeah, long story short, I believe in some cases it can be.
I have a question.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just following up because we do have a lot of our clients. One of the issues they have trying to find housing is, they have a criminal background, a lot of drug convictions, a couple of sex offenders, and we're such a tight housing market up here in Sandpoint and Bonner County, and so even just trying to find temporary or anything for these clients is really troublesome. So I didn't know if there was any protections. Are they allowed to discriminate? Is that part of their background check? Are they allowed to discriminate for their history?
Right. Yeah, I know it can be really difficult for people with those backgrounds sometimes. Yeah, and I apologize, I don't have a clearer answer on that. I haven't really worked with that form of discrimination as much, but I think, yeah, that NHLP website I mentioned would be a good resource, and also Intermountain Fair Housing might have some more expertise on that subject. But it is an important issue, and I think that the current administration is trying to make that a bit more of a priority. So hopefully, those protections will become even stronger, over time.
I was going to ask, what are the repercussions to either the landlords or neighbors, if are found or proven that these issues have happened?
Yeah. So, I think it depends. If, for example, someone has a landlord initially denies a reasonable accommodation request because they don't think that it adequately shows a connection between the disability and the need for the accommodation, but then the tenant provides that verification, then they've done their duty, they've done what they need to. Well, I should say, and then the housing provider grants the reasonable accommodation. They've done what they need to, no further repercussions. If they don't, then if they discriminate in any way that's prohibited and continue after they've been told that that is unlawful, then the tenant can file a fair housing complaint with HUD, and HUD has a process it goes through. It investigates, it talks to both parties, it tries to mediate a bit, find a resolution that will work for both parties short of litigation. But if it finds cause that discrimination was in fact perpetrated by the housing provider, then it can go ahead and impose penalties on that landlord, or it might even go to the DOJ and they could file a complaint. A tenant also has, not everyone has the means to do this, but a tenant can also file suit themselves against the landlord. So, and there are a range of penalties under all of those options, you know, it could be monetary. There's also injunctive relief. You know, there could be mandatory training for the housing provider and their employees. So yeah, it can get, there can be a lot of liability for the housing provider if they, you know, don't meet their obligations here.
I wanted to ask a question, Bonnie. So this is a really great presentation and I appreciate your time here. I'm curious to know what you think is the best way for us as a group of program providers and advocates to help disseminate this information and make sure that it's getting saturated in the community. And I say that, I mean, for obvious reasons, but I also think that this is my personal observation. I don't have data to back it up, but I think with a really tight housing market and high rentals and a low inventory, I feel that perhaps this violations of fair housing might be happening, but folks feel like they don't want to rock the boat because they could lose, you know, their housing that they have. They've tried, you know, we're on waiting lists or what have you, or don't have another option. And so I'm curious if, and this could be a question for the group too, how do we take this information and use it to really ensure that we're advocating for our community that could feel like if they speak up, they're going to lose their housing and they don't have the resources to fight it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, you know, of course, if anyone else wants to speak up too, but I think, you know, some ways could be just, you know, if you have a client who, in the course of talking to them, you think that there might be a fair housing issue, always welcome to refer them to us or the Intermountain Fair Housing Council. We and Intermountain also have some brochures on fair housing rights that we'd be happy to send you and your organization. There's also, you know, some great resources on fair housing rights that you could direct your clients to or view yourself on Intermountain's website, our website, HUD's website. So, and I think just even just being aware of it, you know, is and aware of the rights under the Fair Housing Act is a great way to you know, help spread the word. And I think you're absolutely right, Carrie. Unfortunately, with how tight the housing market is, I do think people are a little scared, you know, with good reason. But I think the more that people can push back, the more that landlords become educated about their responsibilities, and you know, hopefully the less it happens in the future. So I think spreading the word is really great and really important.
And the reason, and well, as to kind of close that loop, thank you. It's a good answer. But one of the reasons that we got connected with Bonnie and to the rest of the group is because she offered to bring some brochures and flyers to our office. We don't see very many walk-in clients. And so my hope is to connect her with you guys all who do have walk-in traffic or are working in more direct service programs to ensure that those informational materials are top of mind.
Great. Any other questions, Bonnie? Oh, go for it.
Oh, nope. I was going to just make a closing comment, but go ahead.
I was just seeing if there were any other questions for Bonnie. It's like everybody's waiting to hear your closing comment, Carrie.
I just want to shout out Idaho Legal Aid Services and Bonnie specifically. To my understanding, you guys are covering a 5-county area on a very small staff, and that is not easy. And I'm sure that the the volume of cases that come through your door is far more than what you feel you can, represent. And so I just really appreciate the time that you have taken to come help us understand, and for overall the legal representation advocacy work that you do for our communities. And if there's a way that we can help support you as a network, I'll speak for United Way, but I think we're all kind of the same ilk.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I know, all of your organizations are doing wonderful work too. So yeah, really, again, appreciate the chance to come speak to you today.
And Bonnie, would I be able to get this presentation to share with the group?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have your email. So yeah, I'd be happy to send it over to you this morning.
Great. Yeah, there looks like there's a lot of good links previously, and then certainly on this page as well. So thank you so much for being here and presenting. We will share this slide deck with the email list, so those that weren't able to join us can have the information as well. And then if it's okay, we'll put your contact information in there. And of course, this video will be on our YouTube channel. We'll send the link to that as well. So thank you, Bonnie. We have about 15 minutes left or so. So if we want to go around the room and share kind of what's happening, what's needed, that would be great.
I guess I'll maybe go ahead and sign off, but thank you again, and have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Bonnie.
I'll share something.
Great.
At North Idaho College, last week was our launch of our parent support group that we started. And so we are meeting weekly with different parents on campus, and that's in partnership with St. Vincent's Eye Care program. And so far it's been really amazing. So this is more of a win than an ask. Just, it's been really cool because parents are showing up and they're talking and they're getting to know each other. And it's just been a really cool thing to witness. So that's just a good thing happening on campus.
Great.
I'll go. NAMI is doing virtual. Actually, we're going to start doing an in-person family support group for parents and friends that have someone in their family or friendship group that suffers from mental health issues. It's the third Tuesday of every month, and we're going to be doing it in person at Disability Action Center. We're going to be doing hybrid, so there'll be a Zoom link as well. And if anybody's interested in that, just get a hold of me and I'll send you a poster with the Zoom link on it. Looking at doing, and it's just a matter of community action and Blue Cross getting a date together, but First Presbyterian Church and Blue Cross are probably going to be doing another poverty simulation soon. And after we do the poverty simulation, and we'll have lunch at the church, and then they're going to be doing a Bridges Out of Poverty 6-hour workshop as well on that day. We're looking at a date at the end of May for that. So that's upcoming. And that's about it for now.
Great. Thanks, Donna. KJ.
Yes, hello. I'm speaking with my Idaho Resiliency Project hat on. Today, the grant application RFPs are going to be landing in all of your emails, and there's about 50,000 to spend on programs or projects that are building resilience in vulnerable populations in the 5 counties of North Idaho. There's a small grant application, which is more simple for under $1,000, and then there's $1,000 to $10,000. It's a very short application window. They're due at the end of February 28th. The awards will be on March 6th, and funding should arrive the week of March 20th. And it's about 4 months to spend the funds. They need to be spent by June 30th. So it's a really great way. It's not going to be a really difficult process. We worked hard to make the applications fairly simple and easy to use. And so please, when you get, if I'm not sure that all of you are on the mailing list, but just forward the RFPs to your mailing list. And we're really excited. It's a lot of money to spend on this type of things, and parent programs are a perfect example of any costs associated with those for parents. This program can take it away. And there's also the small grant options can also be done by reimbursable. So we made it so you don't have to try to crank your mind trying to think of a budget. You can just spend the items and provide the receipts and be reimbursed for it. So that might help if you don't know how many parents are coming. You just kind of keep track, and then at the end it would be reimbursed. If you have any questions on that, just reach out to me separately. And we're super excited about that. And then just another quick note, with my Children's Trust Fund hat on, so I make sure everybody received the save the date announcement for the kickoff day, April 5th, for Child Abuse Prevention Month. And that'll be at the Harding Center in the afternoon on the 5th. And then the wrap-up celebration will be at the Post Falls Library. I think it's the 24th of April. So we're gearing up for all the Prevent Child Abuse activities for that month. There's going to be t-shirts that are super cool coming out, posters, window painting teams, etc. More details will come, but if you'd like to have your agency reserve a booth or parking lot space for one of the events, reach out to me about that. And if you want windows painted, that's home, car, or business, reach out to me to get on the list for that. Hopefully you can all attend in person to one of the events. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, KJ. And make sure you have those sugar cookies with the blue frosting again. I think I had 3 of them.
That's funny. I'm glad you mentioned it. That has not come up yet, so we'll have to get on that.
Don't worry, Mark,
Alright.
we'll always remind you about cookies.
Yes.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, I got my marching orders.
All right, who else?
Well, I'll jump in here real quick, and
Great.
I'm just going to shoot you my email here on this chat thing. Say I'm fairly new here at Mountain States Early Head Start, but I'm excited to be here. It's something that's been near and dear to my heart, and I'm a lifer here in this community. So positive things are really good. One of the tasks that I kind of assigned myself is networking and reaching out. We're always, there's a lot of people that know about Head Start, not so much about Early Head Start. We, target prenatal to 3 years of age. Obviously, it's a great program. There's qualifications for it, obviously. But we're always trying to reach out and just make us known in the community. So if anybody has a bulletin board, or a place for a poster, or to distribute our information out to people who could potentially can use our services, we'd love to do that. And I stuck my email in there, and if something, you have a place or you want to ask a question or anything that I can do, hey, we're all in this about people, and we're on the kids side. So when the kids side is the family side. So it's a real positive to be involved in any kind of group that's like this, and appreciate, being here and learning what I have today. And, any way we can partner in any way, appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
And speaking of children's and families, Family Promise is a homeless shelter for children and their supporting families. And it's a few months out, but I'm just throwing the shout out that our 2 biggest fundraisers are coming up in May and in June. We're having our Cinco de Mayo dinner in May, and then our golf classic in June. So more information to come.
Awesome. Thank you. Who's next?
I have a few things that I can share. So as always, I know I always share this, but we have our scholarship program. If you know a family that could benefit from receiving a child care scholarship, please send them our way. The application is pretty straightforward. I'm available to support if they need help with filling it out. But we do have funds available for families that need scholarship support. Additionally, we are working to get our Ready for Kindergarten program back up and running. So if you're not familiar with Ready for Kindergarten, it is a kindergarten readiness program that honors parents as their child's first and best teacher. We teach parents how to play with purpose, and we give lots of materials to help families do that. If you are interested in hosting a Ready for Kindergarten workshop for families, or you know a space we could host a workshop, you want your families to attend this workshop, please, please, please reach out to me. We are currently working on getting these workshops set up in our community. And then finally, we have our Early Learning Collaborative. We meet monthly. We are focused on improving access, quality, and equity in early education in the 5 northern counties. If you're interested in joining us, I can send you some more information about that. I'll put my email in the chat, as well as a little bit more information about our scholarships, our Ready programs, and our early learning collaboratives.
Awesome. Thanks, Shelby. Anyone else?
I'll go. This is Chrissy from Navigation, and just wanted to remind everybody, we do still have emergency assistance funding, career enhancement funding, and kinship funding. The kinship funding is for families who are raising children that are not their biological children. And whatever that relationship is, there's a lot of flexibility there. I know some of the other funding is no longer available. So we may be able to fill in that gap. Our funding is tied to children. So, unfortunately, if somebody doesn't have children in the home that they're caring for, they would be eligible for our case management, but they wouldn't be eligible for the funding. But, sometimes we can help them develop a financial plan to self-remedy, or refer them to other agencies that may be able to help without having the child attached to that family. We're also getting a new automated system. We're going live on Monday. So it's going to be a bit hectic for a minute, but this system will allow us to better capture data and do better data analysis to help better serve our clients.
Chrissy, could you put your email in the chat?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else?
Hi, Mark. It's Keeler from the Idaho Department of Labor.
Hi there.
Hello. I just wanted to say last month we had our best job fair that we've had since pre-pandemic times. We have a new marketing director in Boise. She's in her 20s, so she hit social media. We were on radio, paper, Facebook, everything. The employers were overjoyed. I also want to say I just got a call and a talk from Doug Wheeler from Real Life Ministries. And instead of having 65 tables at the big one in April, we are going to have 100 tables. So we're reaching out to all of our communities that are in Sandpoint, St. Mary's. We're going to go far reaching on that one. And Frank, I'm excited to meet you. I worked with Wendy last year, so it's a great call for that, but I'm super excited. I hope that we can get media coverage for it. And it brought out some potential employees that were amazing. So that's a big win for the Idaho Department of Labor, I say, and for all of us. Get jobs.
That's awesome. Thank you. Anyone else want to share? I guess one last thing. So United Way of North Idaho, our awards luncheon is typically in June. We're moving it up to March this year. And we're announcing our Community Care Fund grant recipients, as well as recognizing some local companies. But one of the things that is really the highlight of the luncheon is our Nonprofit Professional of the Year and Volunteer of the Year awards. So since this group works very closely with both of those, nominations are open. So we would love it if everyone here could nominate someone. You know who's doing great work in the community, and they don't necessarily need to be involved with United Way, but it does need to be a 501c3 organization. And the winners are given a $250 contribution to their organization on their behalf, as well as the award. So it's a great opportunity to recognize people. I will include that link in the email that goes out in the follow-up. That way it goes to the entire group instead of just those here. But it's on our website as well if you want to take a peek. Anything else? All right, we're going to end so you can have 2 extra minutes of sunshine. Thank you all. Have a great week.